Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to Open Mic Unplugged. Today, we're going to be doing things a little bit different. We didn't invite outside guests, we brought the conversation home to the people who are living this work every day. So, you're about to hear from the Mic'd Up team, the builders, the leaders, the frontline voices inside this community. They're subject matter experts, but not because a certifying body said so, but because life tested them and they are still standing. When we talk about burnout and betrayal, we're not just talking about exhaustion. We're talking about broken trust. We're talking about carrying weight that was never ours to hold. We're talking about the silent costs leadership rarely accounts for. But today, there's nothing silent about it. Today, we name it. Today, we honor it. And today, we take back our power together. So, with that said, let's light it up. Join me on stage are five powerful voices, the people who aren't just talking about the story, they're living it, building through it, and leading past it. So we'll do a quick round of introductions and ask them just to share their name, a little bit about their background, and then one word on how they are arriving today. All right, so we'll kick off with Alicia.
Hello, hello. Happy Sunday. Sunday fun day. My name is Alicia Green. I live in Houston, Texas, originally from Trinidad and Tobago. I have 15 plus years in the financial services industry. And one word I bring today is gratitude.
All right, gratitude. I love that. All right, we're going to pass the mic to Olivia. Coach O.
Oh, all right. My name is Olivia. I am in quality control and logistics. I have about 4 years of experience in that. And today, my word is radiant.
Radiant. Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. I feel the energy. Thank you, Olivia.
Yeah.
All right. And then we're going to pass the mic to Lance.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lance. I have about 35 years in law enforcement. And I think the word that I'll bring today is just outstanding.
All right. Outstanding. That sounds like you've had an amazing Sunday. So
Yes.
I love that. I love that. All right. And we're going to bring it home with Donna.
Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Donna, and I have a lot of federal experience. You probably won't believe it, but this year marks 40 for me, 40 years in federal government, multiple agencies. And my word for the day is thriving.
Thriving. Woo! I love that. Thank you, Donna. And thank all of you for just that brief introduction. And all right, well, the mic is hot, the table is set, and voices are ready. So let's get into it. So we're going to kick off with our first fireside question and ask, when did burnout first tap you on the shoulder? And what did it really feel like for you? Not the polished answer, the real one. And you guys can feel free to take yourself off mute and share as you're comfortable.
I will go first. I think burnout tapped me on the shoulder when I was getting tasked for things not in my job description. That is when I began to get burnout.
Wow. Yeah. How many of us have experienced that? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead, Alicia.
Whew. When did I feel like burnout tapped me on the shoulder? I think I felt it twice. The first experience was when I was working in retail banking, and this was when in stores were a thing. So my branch was inside of a Randall's, and I was working on Sundays. So Sundays, I was going in from like 11 to 3, and then on weekends, my in-store closed at 7 p.m. And it was, at that time I didn't have a family. It was just me. So I dealt with it, but I thoroughly hated working on weekends. So that was, I would say, my first experience of burnout. And then my second experience was when I came back from maternity leave, when I had my daughter, and my role somewhat changed, like what I was doing before I went off to maternity leave somewhat changed, and I wasn't enjoying it, and I I felt burnt out.
Yeah. Yeah, I can appreciate that. So, your life changed a lot, right, when you became a mother. So, obviously, the added responsibility, and still trying to keep up with all the things, the commitments you already had, and then back in the saddle, right? So, I can imagine what that was like. Yeah. So, who'd like to share next?
Right. Well, I know for me that burnout happened several times throughout my career. The first time, the realization, and I had to actually look back at that, right? The realization came after probably about 6 months after 9/11, because I was a first responder in New York at that time. And the burnout became evident when those that were in administrative positions or hierarchy, they did not really care that the line officers, or cared whether or not if the line officers had um, mental health conditions. They didn't ask. After 9/11 happened, the very next day, we were back out on the streets and we were just told, hey, those that don't belong in the hot zone, don't allow them in. And then when things kind of cooled down, and OSHA said, hey, the air is good, the quality of air is good, everyone can return back to work, and things were moving as normal, so to speak, there was still no, is everyone okay? Get people checked out. So I started to see a lot of people, including myself, just being and behaving differently. But as a police officer, you never show your weakness, right? You
Right.
can't be vulnerable. So you just push through it. And then I'll just hit on one other time is once I moved here to Texas and I started working for another police department, I started feeling the burnout when I said, you know what? I no longer want to do the job that I love so much because of the internal strife that was going
Mm.
on, the hypocrisy that was experienced, and as Coach O said, giving me stuff that wasn't on my workload just because you're a good worker, so we just want to keep front loading you with everything, because those that should do it and are getting paid more than you because they're incompetent, what I'll do is we'll give it to the competent people, right? And
Wow.
at one point in time, I thought that was kind of like, man, you know what? They believe in me. No, that's not what it was. Yeah, they believed that I would get the work done because I got it done, but you know what? They were just using me
Yeah.
at the end of the day. So
Yeah,
that's
real
me.
talk, real
Yeah.
talk. Yeah, yeah. Whew, there's so much that was packed in there, but I'm going to stand down for just a moment because I'll give Donna an opportunity to share, but there's a lot there, Lance. Thank you for sharing that.
I would say two times really in my career. The first time I didn't even realize it was burnout. It was years later that I looked back at what I was doing. I was working at that time for U.S. Customs and in Los Angeles, and I was working 60 hours a week. I had decided to go back for my master's degree on an accelerated program. I did my master's in 1 year. I had a young child and got pregnant. So I had an under two and got pregnant. I don't even remember how I got pregnant, but that just tells you how much pressure I was under during that time. I was a week at the time, and I was young then, and so I just thought, the pressure of moving on and just, setting myself up for my future, advancement. That this was really important, an important thing for me to do, and right then. And so that was the first time, and then the second time was much later in my career, about 8 years ago. I moved to the Houston area and changed agencies, and I was working for a woman who, selected me for the position, but then micromanaged me when I came here, and I was very much self-sufficient, did not need micromanagement, but this was her leadership style, and so we really didn't mesh well together. And so she was, very hard to work with. And so I believe that was really that was a very big challenge for me during that time because I'd never experienced that. I didn't need that, but the environment put
Yeah.
me there.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. So thank you all for sharing your experiences. And I'd like to ask one other question. Like, was there a moment when you realized that it wasn't exhaustion? You weren't just tired, um, that it was actually betrayal. Anybody want to share?
I don't
And
think
I,
I ever had the realization of it actually being betrayal until I met you. And then
oh,
that space was able to open in my mind. But before I was just like used, abused, misunderstood. I guess those were signs of betrayal. I just didn't think of it that way.
yeah. Absolutely. So that level of awareness is so important. And that's one of the things that we are really striving to do in this work, right? Is to allow each of us to elevate our thinking so that we can recognize what's going on around us, right? Not to play victim, but to be able to acknowledge the things that are happening, the environment that we're in, and to be able to move into a space where we're able to self-regulate, right? Because those things can be detrimental to our wellness, and I mean mental, emotional, and it can manifest physically, right? If we're not careful. And so I think a lot of times we think we're just tired, yeah, and we are tired, but we may be mentally exhausted, right? Emotionally exhausted, and not just because we're not getting enough rest, right? Because we're doing more, but because it's draining us, right? So, is there anything anyone else would like to build upon with that in terms of their experience?
I'll speak on the betrayal piece. I felt that in this last situation that I mentioned because when I came, one role was explained to me, like what the job really was and what it entailed, and the breadth and depth of the role. And then when I came and found out the reality of it, I had come from a headquarters environment and I was used to managing things on a national level and international level. And so when I came and the role that was explained to me during my whole interview process and even the job description was far inferior to what it actually was. So I had to recalibrate my thinking and my thought process. And I felt that I did that. But again, with the management style of the woman who was at the helm, um, the way she portrayed it, big, so much bigger than it was, I really felt betrayed in taking the role. It just wasn't what I was envisioned or was told. And I had did a whole move and everything, and it wasn't like I could just turn around and go back.
Yeah. So let me ask another question. You know, what's the one thing you wish leadership actually understood about burnout? And there's no wrong answers for this, right? Um, but if you could advise either current or former leaders who you've worked with that you've gone through this experience with, what's the one thing that you would hope that they understood about burnout and understood about how their behavior has impacted you?
Okay, I'd like to let them know that it actually exists.
Mhm.
Okay, we all understand, and I can only speak from the occupation that I'm in, right? We know that it's a very rigid institution. Um, those that move up the ladder in rank, they forget what it was like to be the rank that they left, right? So they might administer the rules and write the policies and stuff, but they never really go back to the line officers and say, hey, how does this impact your workload, right? It's all about, we just need to get things done. And then they always say it's the needs and the mission of the department, right? That we implement these things. And it's great to put stuff on paper. But if you're not the one doing it and you don't factor that in, you're sending a clear message that, hey, just get it done by any means necessary. And as long as if I'm the chief or the captain or whatever, and it gets done, and I can keep that other rank above me off my back, then I'm good. But no one ever really goes back to the line officers and asks for the impact. I'll give you a great scenario. There was a study done at my department where, and there's a study, but this new chief brought this study into the department and said, officers who have been working a certain shift for a period of time, it's not good. So if you've been a night officer for 10, 15 years, that's not good. If you've been a day officer, so you know what they did? They told people, if you're on a night shift, you're going to day. And if you're on days, you're going to nights. They never asked, how would that impact your family life? Right? The quality of sleep. If I've been working nights for 15 years, I'm not going to be effective next week working a day shift. Why? You know, because I'm usually asleep during that time, right? So it's certain things that impact officers and administration. They just don't care. So I need them to recognize that, hey, if there's something that's causing you to shift policy or to change policy for whatever reason, if that's going to cause the line officers to have to shift and pivot, right? You need to find out from them what's the impact and then be ready to have a resource or something in place. So when these officers are feeling whatever they're feeling or going through, you have something there to maybe a safety net or someone to kind of help guide them through whatever it is that they're going through. Because we've had people leave because they say, you know what? I don't feel respected. The department just, they felt like they were undercut. You know, we're being asked to, go out there and partake in a lot of community engagement and community service. But when the officer doesn't feel respected by the administration and they get beaten down on a regular, how can I now go out and smile and be good to the public when I just left roll call and was hammered for 20 minutes about how I'm not doing good, how I'm not doing well at my job? I mean, thank God. I mean, I'm no longer on the streets, right? So I can really speak because I speak to these officers on a regular. And it's hard and it's taxing because we're supposed to serve and protect the community. And if we're not at our best, how can I be the best for you? So they just need to know that it exists.
Yeah. Real talk.
Yeah. And I know I'm tossing out a lot of stuff that has to be unpacked, maybe at a later date, but
yeah. No, this is good. I mean, that's why we're here, and because, so many times we're doing this work in service to others that, we leave ourselves behind. And that's something that we are trying to be intentional about, that making sure as we are doing this impactful work, as we're unpacking, as we're addressing issues, that we are taking care of ourselves along the way as well, right? Because to some degree, we are experts at it because of the lived experiences that we have. That's what qualifies us to do this work. And so we need to make room at the table for these kinds of conversations. So thank you for sharing that. Is there anybody else that would like to build upon that?
Yeah, I would just like to share one thing I would definitely, I think leadership, some leaders are not very empathetic. So they themselves are so what's the word, knee deep in the work that they don't realize themselves that they're burnt out. And they can't empathize because some leaders, they're doing what their leaders tell them, and to me, an empathetic leader, they can, look at their team, they can get a pulse check of their team and see that we're tired, or
Mhm.
that, we need to have a reset, we need to do a team builder, we need to um, come together, have a meeting, and get everyone's opinion, because we're a team. Like, okay, this person, the work may not be delegated correctly. Some people raising their hand more than others. Some people, they do their jobs well, and this person is assigned so many projects. So I think empathy is a big skill that
Mhm.
a great leader needs to have.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the reality is that all of the things that we're talking about really are about our humanness, right? And so having those, and I think too many times the soft skills are um, deprioritized, right? We get focused on getting the work done. We can become indifferent about the impact that getting that work done has on people. And, and while we're taking care of everybody else and taking care of business, in some cases, we're dealing with primary trauma. In other cases, we're dealing with secondary trauma, like in the case of law enforcement, where they're interacting with the community every day. They're dealing with people really at their worst, right? When you call in law enforcement, it's not because everything is going well. You're calling in law enforcement because there's a problem, there's a crisis, right? And so they're dealing with that day in and day out, and which means they are repeatedly experiencing secondary trauma, right? And that secondary trauma is compounded by the things that they deal with internally within the organization, like what Detective Lance shared, right? And so it's an entire ecosystem, right? I know we like to try and compartmentalize it and, kind of isolate it, but one thing affects another, right? So let's see. Let's hear from somebody else. Around what their experience has been and what they would want to share with leadership.
I can, one thing I'd like to share is I think a lot of managers, directors feel that they are sheltering their team and their employees from the burnout because they're taking the hit of whatever is going on, decisions that are being made, and that they're trying to protect their people and be insular, when your people can see it on you. They can feel it from you. And so, sharing that and sharing what's going on too, that you can, and then recognizing that, not only are you under stress, but, you're putting stress and maybe undue burden on your people as well. When I was working, managing one group, one thing we would do, or I would make sure that we did, were, little fun kind of things with the team, especially when
Mhm.
we were, or just coming out of serious pressure situations, or I knew we were going into one. And so we would
Mhm.
do things like we had a 3-level garage, structure, and we would do a barbecue, like outdoor barbecue,
Mhm.
up on the top level of we'd shut the garage down and have a barbecue. Or, one time I did an indoor miniature golf tournament around people's desks, and,
Oh,
just
nice.
different that, yeah, outside of the box things that just kind of bring that take that different type of levity and bring that in, so that everyone felt a relax, every now and then. So,
Yeah.
just kind of mixing it up a little bit
Yeah.
when
That's amazing, Donna. Yeah. Thank you
Mhm.
for sharing that. And that speaks volumes to you as a leader in the work that you've done and the kind of teams that you built, right? And so when we think about that, that's what, when we're at work, we actually spend more time with the people that we work with than we do with our families, right? And so it does matter that those people that you are spending so much time with, that you actually enjoy being around, if you can. Now, you don't have to like everybody you work with, right? But the environment needs to be conducive to building the right types of relationships and get us to a place where we're doing more than just tolerating each other, right? So I think doing those kinds of out of the box activities and seeing that being prioritized by our leaders is so important. So yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I really want to make sure that we bring the entire community into this. Is there anything do we have anybody online who'd like to share anything that would like to be a part of the conversation, either via chat, or we're happy to invite them to the stage if they'd like to join us there. So Olivia, as you are monitoring, please let us know, right, if there's anybody who'd like to contribute to the conversation, because we'd love to hear from them. So, as we think about everything that's been shared, I think one of the things that I want us to be mindful of is that we're not just talking about, the trauma of it and the fact that, burnout is exhaustion. What we're really talking about is the fact that burnout is a breaking point, right? Burnout is actually a breaking point, And so if you think about that, and I want to ask the people who are online if they would even drop in the chat, what has burnout cost you? And so we want to hear from the team who's in studio as well, but I want to loop in the people who are online and have them contribute and share, what has burnout cost you? And feel free to share. And I'm talking to my in studio team now. And Coach O, if anybody shares in the chat, you can pull in their comment.
Well, I know I can tell you. Go ahead, Coach O. Oh. Okay, I can let you know that for me, burnout cost me my health. And it snuck up on me. And then when it did, it hit me like a ton of bricks. So, and I had no clue, right? So I'm thinking, I'm working, I'm doing this job, I got to serve the public. I have to take care of stuff. I'm not sleeping well. I'm tired, but I'm still pushing through. And I'm saying to myself, you know what? I got to take care of my business. I got to do what I got to do at work, and I'm feeling drained. I'm feeling exhausted. I'm feeling mentally taxed, but I'm still pushing through because why? I've always done that. I've always pushed through, right? But this weight felt different. And I couldn't understand why this weight was different from the other ones that I've always experienced, right? And then that's when I knew something was wrong. I'm like, my health took a toll. I mean, I gained a lot of weight. I wasn't eating correctly. Okay. And I almost wasn't really caring about, when I say caring about life, I wasn't looking at taking my own life, but I wasn't caring about day-to-day stuff anymore. It was like I was moving through the motions. I was going through the motions, just being like a robot, just getting up, going to work, clocking in, doing the bare minimum and clocking out, and I was just moving through as if I knew I was in existence. I knew my body was here, but I knew I was outside of who I was. So I was almost like looking at myself, just moving through, not bringing anything worthwhile, to work, just doing the bare minimum. And that's not my character. So that's when I knew that there was something else going on, but then again, there's a twofold, being a guy and being the A type. I ain't going to look for no help, right? I got this. Because when people hit 911, I show up and I take care of all their problems. So darn it, I'm going to take care of mine. And you know what? I didn't. But then eventually something snapped and I said, this is not me. I can't live the rest of my life this way. let me start getting myself into the gym and start doing the right thing for myself. Because if I'm not good for me, I can't be good for anyone else. And then that's when I made the intentional change. Because I could have just stayed like that, and would have been okay. Get a check every 2 weeks and just do, what is it? To pass a class, pass a grade is like 70%, right? As long as I gave 70%, I'd have been good. No more, no less. But I know that that's not my personality. So that's why I made the intentional shift to let me really look at what's going on with self and try to self-correct and move in the right direction. And so far, I'll knock on wood, I've been doing all right.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. And that is one of the biggest prices that we pay, right? Is our wellness and, our mental stability. And we have a comment, from the audience, sharing burnout has cost me a loss of mental stability. Wow. That's too high of a price to pay, to say the least, right? But, that is our truth. That is our reality. And it also really kind of uncovers one of the biggest challenges that we have in Black and Brown communities, right? Like for a large part, we don't believe in therapy. We're afraid of therapy. We don't understand it, right? It's normalized for other communities, but it's taboo for us. And so when we're going through these times, these parts of our journey, we often don't seek treatment, right? We often don't seek help, and that's one of the biggest issues that we face. And so, but thank you for sharing that. And I believe this is Coach's comment that we have posted on the screen. Thank you for sharing that, Kosha. I hope that next time you will consider joining us in studio. But thank you for sharing your feedback. Anyone else that would like to build on that?
I will say burnout has cost me sleepless nights. When I was in college, I worked for a bank and we had a boss and she was a micromanager. She would kind of like lash out and target people, and her communication skills weren't the best. And I was a vault teller, so I had control all of the money within the bank. When I tell you that lady had me stressed out, I would be second guessing myself. Did I lock this? Did I count that? Was this right? Was that right? And I would sleepless nights, wake up the next morning, calling whoever's on shift while I'm going to my first class of the day. Like, hey, can you make sure I lock this? And they will always be like, you always do everything right. We don't know why you question yourself. That burnout cost me my mental health. Like, that was a lot. And so I learned, I can't let nobody stress me out. If you are who you are, but I have to trust in myself that I'm doing my job and doing what I'm doing. So burnout will cost you some things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else like to share? Okay. All right. Well, I think this is a great time for me to bring another one of our team members onto the stage. So we're going to invite Dorian to the stage to join us. And Dorian, just do just a quick intro, just, your name and kind of the work you do, just a little bit of a background so people know where you're coming from.
Yeah, of course. My name is Dorian. I'm a collegiate softball coach, so I'm an assistant coach at the University of Delaware, and I'm in a hybrid role doing some culture and leadership development on our student success side. So I'm also an assistant athletic director in that space as well. And I apologize for being late. We had a game today. We won. So
yeah. Thank you, Dorian. And so, we're kind of at a point where we were just talking about what burnout has cost us. And so everybody shared. I know you got to hear a little bit of that conversation. I don't know if there's anything that you would like to add to that now that you have joined us on stage, or if you do, please feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I just would echo what was said specifically by Olivia, where you're thinking about every potential misstep before you even take the step, and that how much that impacts like your confidence and your self value, and being able to be in a space where you can make mistakes and you can learn and you can grow is so valuable versus feeling like you have to be perfect all the time, and that perfection, I think, is what really leads you to the burnout. It's not always the tasks or the job or the responsibility. It's I have to do these things while being flawless, and that to me is what I think created some stress for me in my last position, where it was like, man, I just don't even know if I can grow here. I just have to be so good at the things that I'm already doing. I'm not willing to try anything new. I'm not willing to present new ideas, right? Like I just want to fly under the radar and just be good at the things that are already on my to-do list. And I think that lack of creativity, or that lack of creative expression or opportunities to have creative expression, can also lead to some of those feelings of burnout as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Wow. Thank all of you for speaking this energy into the room, for not just sharing your experiences, but really for shifting the atmosphere. And so it's so important that we have spaces like this to be able to express ourselves and to share those experiences and recognize that we're not alone, right? That we're all kind of going through different episodes along our journey that have had an impact on us, and not in the best ways, right? And so, the one thing that I want to kind of put a pin in right here is that, well, there's a couple of things. The first thing is we need to be mindful of the fact that hurt people, okay? And so, whether we're thinking about it from our own personal perspective, or whether we try and better understand the leaders that we work with, when we see certain behaviors, we have to recognize that everybody is a product of their environment, and whatever they have been exposed to, whatever has been normalized for them, is what they tend to repeat, right? Unless we take intentional actions not to become like them, right? Not to take that on as our own. And so, Alicia, I think a moment ago you looked like you had something that you wanted to share there. So let me pause for a moment and give you the mic.
No, when he said hurt people, I was like, say it out loud again. Um, but it's just as Olivia said and Dorian said, just echoing, like it really makes you sometimes you could get burnt out and it can make you feel insecure, like professionally insecure. So you can be a very confident person, but in your career or in the role you're in, when your manager, if you're burnt out or if you don't have good leadership, it can make you second guess every single thing you do. And to me, that it puts you in a very vulnerable situation because when you're professionally insecure in your role, it shows because the quality of your work declines. You're going to be asking around for help. You're like, you're just not strong and confident in everything you do. And then, you may be making mistakes that could bring red flags. You're trying to fly under the radar, as Dorian said, and just do the best you can. But if something comes up, the manager will like, hey, micromanage you. So it's just very, very uncomfortable. I know for me, last year was the most trying year for me. I know in this environment, everybody is talking about going to therapy, mental health, and I before I think a couple of years ago, I was like, I don't need therapy. I'm good. I got this. I'm gonna just talk to my tribe. I'm gonna listen to some music, go out, take a trip. But let me tell you, Lord Jesus, last year I was totally tested and I had to seek therapy. I was losing my mind. I was literally losing my mind. I was walking on eggshells at work. I like my confidence would drop. I was second guessing myself. I didn't my the doctor put me on meds because I had to see a behavioral health, and I saw my general my MD, and she gave me meds, and I couldn't take it because it was going to make me sleepy for work, and I need to be cognitive. So it's listen, burnout, betrayal, just it it messed with me. I don't want to curse on live air, but it messed with me. Y'all know what I'm trying to say. It messed with me big time.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And thank you so much for sharing that truth, right? And and for being vulnerable here for the benefit of others, because it's so important that we be able to, call a thing, right? Call it what it is. Because if you can't name it, you can't fix it, right? So I want to kind of keep building on that. And here's the next layer. Um, if you're honest, did you ever find yourself gaslighting your own feelings? Telling yourself that, it's not that bad. You just need to keep pushing through. Um, yeah, unmute
I could,
yourself.
I could, I could speak on that. I think so. I worked for an organization for, it's the only job I had, literally. Like, graduated college, started within the organization, and moved my way up. Entry level, got into management, then left that retail banking, moved over into corporate, and moved my way up. And I was like, it's not too bad. I've been here so long. It's not, because there's a saying, the grass isn't always green on the other side. Because a lot of people told me you need to get out of there. Because I've been seeing just my colleagues over the years. They move, they grow up, they move up the corporate ladder, and there's like, Elisa, you still there? It's like, yeah, I have all these vacation days, I'm comfortable. I have a hybrid schedule. They're flexible with me, but my leadership changed. And when I tell you, a bad manager can make your life a living hell, like a living hell. You could be in the same organization and have a different manager, and it could be amazing. And yeah, I was like, oh yeah, I'm fine. In my defense, I would say I did attempt to look, but I didn't find anything. So I was like, I'm gonna just write it out, and yeah, try to write it out, and yeah, it just didn't work out in my favor. So it was very uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah. Anyone else like to build on that, share their experience?
Yeah, I'll make mine real simple. I would go back and say to myself, you know what? God wouldn't give me more than what I can handle. So I was fooling myself. So every day, just pushing, more stuff added, just pushing. And finally, I was like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. The reality is this is not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And I just reached that point. I just finally got there. And I said, let me stop tricking myself, because that's what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And something I had learned recently, that no is a complete sentence.
Yeah, it is.
Can you? Nope. I don't owe you anything else. No.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Who else? Who else?
Yeah, for me, I wanted to advance in my career, and there were not people above me not very many people who looked like me. And so I knew in my mind I had to do more and prove more to get more. And so I pushed myself beyond what anyone else at my level was doing. And I felt I had to do more, to even get recognized, which is unfair, but, that was my reality where I was. And so, I had to do not just the extra mile, but the extra 10 miles,
Yeah.
to be on track for what I felt would get me where I needed to be or felt I needed to be.
Yeah. And that's real talk, Donna. I mean, the truth is, Black in America, and I actually have a dissertation to prove it. So I did my doctoral dissertation on strategies for the advancement of African American women leaders. Okay. And I will give you the synopsis of that. You got to be the whole meal, not a snack. You got to be the whole meal, dessert, the after dessert coffee, and everything else that goes with it. Okay. So not only do you have to have the education and the experience, you have to overperform, even when you're in the role, right? You have to overperform. And so the reality is like, and this conversation could go so many ways. Oh my God, even when we look at the dismantling of DEI initiatives and things like that, when we know DEI did not help us, okay? Anything that has to do with human rights or equal rights, equity, or anything like that, when we fight for something, it benefits all. And in many cases, we are not even the ones, although we may be leading the fight, we are not even the ones who are the benefactors of those policies, right? And so I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I just want to confirm and affirm that Donna's comment around having to do more, be more, and not just going the extra mile, but going the extra 10 miles, right, is truth and reality. And anybody any person of color who thinks differently, the only advice I can give you is keep living. Because if you stay in the game and you stay in the race, you're going to get to experience it, right? And all of those things are what contribute to the burnout. That at some point, we just start to feel like we just tapped out, right? I think in this current time, as we look at all of the things that have been going on, if we just go back to the beginning of the year, 2025 has dealt us a hand, okay? Actually, 2024 dealt the hand, and now we're playing it, okay? And so when we look at everything, all of the energy and the momentum that is driving decisions in this country today, right? We are, I think it might have been Donna or somebody else I was talking to, and I said, oh my God, 2025 feels like a mass exodus of Black women from the workplace. That's what it feels like, because if you talk to 5 people, 1 in 5, 1 in 3 are going to be talking to you about either a recent exit from the workplace or a planned exit, or the fact that they need to be thinking about it. It's insurmountable. And
I have a
so,
question.
yeah. Oh, sure. Go ahead.
You mentioned that you have to overperform in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, how could you overperform if you're not in the right role? So sometimes, say you might get hired for a role, and while you're in the role, your job responsibilities change,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just not aligned with your skill set, and you just don't enjoy the job. But you know deep down that in order for you to get a promotion or to get out of the role, you have to do the job well. How do you perform in a job that it's not that you just don't like, or it's not for you? How do you get out of it?
Yeah.
Like, how is that possible? Like,
So the reality is that sometimes positioning you that way is a growth opportunity, and sometimes it's a setup. Okay. That's what you have to understand. Sometimes decisions are not made not with your best interest at heart. Okay. And you're thrown into situations where you either sink or swim. Now, what it does is it puts you in a position where you have to be willing to make decisions that are best for you. But unfortunately, what happens to most of us, because we're driven by the paycheck, right, is that we find ourselves in these situations and we won't save ourselves. We know that we're going down, but we will not save ourselves because our motivation and what drives us is the money, maybe the position, maybe being comfortable and complacent is dangerous, right? So it becomes about you making decisions that are best for you. When you find yourself in those situations, any situation that you don't want to be in, that is not healthy for you, that is not allowing you to advance in the direction that you want to go, it goes back to our Open Mic Unplugged episode 1 conversation around organizational fit, right? Maybe you were a good fit for that organization at some point in time, but as the organization changes and evolves, and you change and evolve, if there becomes misalignment, right? If you're no longer connecting into the things that are feeding you, that are allowing you to grow, then you have to be honest with yourself and make a decision about what is best for you. Do you stay? Do you go? Yes, go ahead, Dorian.
I just wanted to add, I agree wholeheartedly, and I do think that this is just a great time.
Dorian, we have a little bit of feedback from you. Let's see.
Is that better?
Try to talk.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
No.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Oh, wow. I wanted to hear what you were going to share.
I don't know. I don't have. Let me see if I have some headphones.
Okay. While Dorian looks for headphones, is there anyone else that would like to share while she tries to get her headphones?
I would agree with the points that you made. At each point, I had to look at, what am I really trying to get out of this? Does it look like my path, the path that I'm on, that I map for myself, is being blocked? And is it being blocked by people who I can't get around? And that happened to me a couple of times in my career by managers who I've only had a few managers that look like me, female and Black, that blocked me. And I had to recognize, politically, how do I manage to get around them to get what I need? Because, they kind of tried to squash my expectations of myself. And I was like, woman, you don't know me. You don't understand the path that I'm on. And so, but I had to be very politically careful about what I said around them and around other people, because you don't know who's talking to who, who's connected to who, who's aligned with who, and who's been working with, the same people longer than you've, been around. And so, I had to kind of set, everybody doesn't have to know your plan.
Right.
Everybody doesn't have to know what you're doing or why you're doing. I can't tell you how many people asked me when I went back to school for my master's degree, why I was going to school. That worked with me.
Wow.
Why are you going to school? You don't need that for this job. I know I don't. But this wasn't the job I planned to stay in.
Right. Real talk.
I did not need it for that job. And so, but I didn't have to I did not tell them, I don't plan to stay in this job.
Right.
That was for me and my people to know.
Right.
So, and when I was ready to make a move, I was prepared to make the move.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's real talk. Right. And so that's intentionality, right? That's also self-governing, because you mind your own business, right? And you don't feel like that you owed anybody an explanation as to why you were doing what you were doing. And I think that and I can echo that, right? Even in my experience, I went back to school and completed my bachelor's degree after 25 years. and I did my bachelor's and my master's and my doctorate. And no job that I have had over the course of my now 33-year career required me to have those degrees. But I also was afforded the opportunity to see what happens when I found myself in a leadership role without them. When I found myself in a leadership role without them, I was unprotected, right? I was a target because I had others who didn't look like me, who were junior to me, who I trained, coached, and hired into an organization, who were then now positioned to win, and I was laid off. I was let go, right? Because I was in a leadership role. I was their manager, but I didn't have a degree. So I chose to use that opportunity to say, you know what? Never again. That will never happen to me again. And that's what motivated me to go back to school after 25 years and complete my degrees and stay in school for 8 years with a full-time job, kids in school, a family, a husband, and everything that went along with that I pressed forward and said, never again, right? And it had nothing to do with a job description that told me, nobody told me I needed to have a doctorate degree. But I also made another pivot in my career where I was in a role that I was comfortable. I could have probably stayed there and maybe even retired. And I had to say, girl, are you crazy? You doing all this work? You going back to school? You doing all of this to stay in a role that you're already in? You have to be mad, right? So it is really about choices. The choices you make for yourself and your willingness to get a little bit uncomfortable. And because I understand, like where you're coming from, Alicia, because of the fact that, you were at your organization from an intern. You had put all of your time in there. You were heavily vested, right? And because you were heavily vested, it made it hard for you to make a decision that would allow you to pivot in a way that was in your best interest, because you were so committed to doing what was in their best interest. Right? So, okay, I see we got Dorian back, and Dorian got headphones. So, Dorian, let me pass the mic to you.
Yes, I think is that better? Okay,
Yeah.
great. I think what I was going to say might actually tack on to what you just finished with. What I was going to say is this is just a good reminder for all of us that our loyalty, like the company's loyalty, is never to us. And our loyalty should never wholly be to the business, the brand, unless it has our name on it, unless our name is next to owner, founder, something like that. And I know in a previous experience of mine, my loyalty to the people that I worked with and the student athletes that I was working with was so strong that it held me there potentially for longer than I needed to be there. And I think it speaks to a little bit of what Alicia was going through in her situation, where it's like, well, I've built my life in this business, in this company, at this place with these people. But at the end of the day, like Dr. Marie, like you said, if they're trying to get you out, they're going to find a way to get you out. They're going to change your job description. They're going to change your responsibilities. They're going to set you up to fail. They're going to make you uncomfortable. They're going to try and hire their own people. They're going to start taking things that you used to be responsible for and giving it to other people. And you're going to feel that sooner than you want to acknowledge it, if you have a space where you've spent a lot of good years. And so I just think for me, that was a wake-up call. Like, man, this is not, I was young in my career and I was like, wow, there is no love lost here. Like, I am very dispensable at this place. And I didn't feel like the work that I was doing was easily replaceable, but they did, and so it's just a reminder that like that loyalty needs to be to yourself and to your growth journey and your potential career and like the things that you're trying to develop, and not to the business or brand or company that will sell you out in a second for potentially even being a great performer because they just need something different, want something different, want a new look, new leadership, whatever that is. So that was the point that I was going to as we were sort of transitioning. Sorry for the tech.
Yeah, no. That's a huge add to the conversation. Thank you so much for finding your headphones and for sharing that experience, because that's what this is about, right? That's what this is about. Those are lessons learned. And when we come to the table together like this, what it gives us the opportunity to do is learn from each other so that we don't have to learn everything the hard way. But we have to be willing to stand in our truth. We have to be willing to be transparent, to be vulnerable to some degree, right? But we do that in safe spaces like this, right? Because we realize that all spaces are not safe. Some of them are looking to undermine us. And so, but what it requires us to do is stand in our own truth and be honest with ourselves about the environment that we're in, the people that we're working with, who we are individually. Get focused and get dogmatic about what you want for yourself. Okay. Because a lot of this has to do with you understanding who you are and what you want, what your trajectory is, right? And being willing to do the things that you need to do in order to get there. Because they have absolutely no problem with replacing you the moment they figure out that you're no longer aligned with the outcome that they're seeking, right? And that's the truth for all of us. I don't care what the organization is, I don't care who the manager or the leader is. Alignment, organizational fit, and organizational culture will eat your lunch every day, right? If the culture of that organization allows for those behaviors that we're talking about around burnout and betrayal, then that's what it is, right? And that also means that if that is the organizational culture, that has been established as what is required by leaders and those who aspire to be successful in those organizations. You got to fall into line. And I'm saying that as former military. Lance, you're former military too, right? The only way to be successful is to align. And so you have to make a decision for yourself whether or not you're willing to, fall into line with what they determine is required for success, or whether you push off and you move on to your next opportunity, right? And we know, we as our mamas say, don't overstay your welcome. We know when we've overstayed, right? We know when we've overstayed, but we get comfortable and complacent, and we're not willing to do what's required for us to move forward. But the one thing that I know is, if you don't learn the lesson, God will let you repeat it, and he will let you sit down in it, right? So when things are going on around you, and you, as they say, the writing on the wall, when somebody shows you who they are, don't pretend you don't see them. However that leader shows up for you, that's who they really are. So don't try to make them into something that they're not, because the only person you can control is you. And so everything comes back to the decisions that you make for yourself and doing what's best for you, right? So I want to ask another question just as a segue to that conversation, and ask you, what's one thing you're doing differently today that would lead you to a different outcome? And if you need a moment, take a moment, right? But what's one thing that you are doing today, or and if you're not already doing it, that you're willing to do to get you to a different outcome?
I would say I have a mentor, and that's you.
Thank you.
Just, I think, as you said, the writings was on the wall, and when God shows you who someone is, believe it. I was too complacent, and who don't hear will feel. That's the saying, but
Mhm.
I just, in retrospect, I'm like, man, I should have made moves quicker. Like I should have. I tried, but I didn't like execute. Like
Mm,
I did make attempts to make moves, but I was like, no, it's gonna be. So I think I part of me feels like God is teaching me a lesson, but we'll see how it plays out. We'll see.
yeah. Anybody else like to share anything?
I think for me, I am making a really concerted effort to mind the business that pays me.
Mhm.
There are times where I want to get involved in decision making or give my feedback in areas. And the minute I get wrapped up in that and the decision isn't what I think it should be, I'm stressed out or I'm worried about it. And so for me, it's like, if that's not under my list of responsibilities, like I'm not going to give it that emotional investment because I don't have enough to go around, right? I don't have enough to
Mhm.
worry about my job and your job and your job. I can only worry about my job, and so that for me is me just trying to protect that little bit of peace that I have and hold on to it. And then when I got to get flared up, it's on things that are going to, impact my work, not doing it for other people to help benefit their work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say at the beginning of my career, self care was not a thing.
Hmm.
I can't pinpoint when it came in, but I'm taking advantage of it now. And I will tell you, confession, Friday, I took off from work and I spent the entire day at a spa. There were classes, there were treatments, there
Yeah.
were relaxation. I had signed up for 2 classes that I didn't even go to. I just sat out on a veranda in the hill country and I just looked at nature by myself in quiet solitude. And let me tell you, I feel good. That's why I was bouncing around at the beginning because I was coming back on the road. But if I would have done some things early in my career to just take time for me, I had a family. I had, I told you I was working all these hours. I had children. I had relationships. I had, sorority things. I was in this group and that group and doing this for the community. I My schedule was crazy, but I didn't really take time for me. And
Mhm.
so I think in hindsight, if I could roll back the road
Mhm.
and add anything in, the little spice along the way, it would be that. To,
Yeah.
figure out what that thing is. And it could just be, I'm going off on my own and I'm going to take, an hour to have a lunch, a really good lunch with just me and a book or something, just whatever that thing is. Find
Yeah.
that thing and do it.
Yeah. So I see we have another comment from the online community. So I affirm that having a mentor, um, I should say the right mentor, will activate light switches with even the shortest discussions. I'm thanking the Almighty for the divine connection to build for agility. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Um, that is the whole purpose behind this work, right? That even if we reach one, we've done the work that we are assigned. And I'm so super proud that the team that's on this call today, that is standing in their truth, that for every single one of us, not just me, but every single one of us on this call is walking in our purpose and doing work that we're designed to do. And we can't skip the work, right? And that's something that we all align and agree on. And we are working very hard to be able to create a table like this one, to be able to provide a place for us that is a safe space, that we can stand in our truth, but also that we can reach back and support each other. And so I want to say to every single one of you who are on this call, thank you, because your contribution, your commitment, and the work that you are putting in is invaluable, right? And this work is allowing us to be a part of something that is bigger than us individually. So I thank you for that. So before we close, I want to leave you with, 3 simple but powerful things that you can do that will allow you to move forward on your pivot and into your next chapter. And so the first one is set boundaries. Set boundaries. And I want you to start with that this week. Don't put it off for another time. Set boundaries and honor it, right? The second one is release one excuse that you've been using to stay small, right? They want you to stay small. Release yourself and say no more excuses, right? And the third one is take one bold step to reclaim your voice, whether it's at work, at home, your own story. Because small moves add up to big shifts, right? And you don't have to change everything overnight. You just have to get started. You just have to make a decision that you want a different outcome, right? So I want to say to anyone who is listening or who listens to the replay, if there's anything that we shared today that was helpful to you, that is allowing you to make the decision that you want to lead differently, that you want to be differently, that you want to activate your pivot, then we want to extend the opportunity for you to take our PivotX activation scan. And so this is a self-assessment. It's not a quiz. It's a mirror showing you where you are, and it's a map for where you need to go next. And so we'll drop the link in the chat. Feel free to take that. You can scan the QR code that's on the screen. It's completely free. And this will give you the kind of insights that you need to be able to make a different decision for yourself. And then finally, I just want to say thank you for showing up today. Thank each of you for being a part of this conversation, for sharing your story, for helping us build what's next. And I encourage you to stay powerful, stay moving, stay committed, and keep building. And we'll see you at the next table.